So usually the person who's abused is not able to tell that they are actually being abused. They're just feeling bad, but they cannot pinpoint where exactly is the problem. And that's because of the manipulation that happens in this cycle. A trauma bond and love are often confused together, and the reason for that is because they provide very similar feelings yet different. And the thing is, we have to put into consideration about one thing. We watch a lot of movies, and most of the things we're watching in movies as portrayed as love are actually trauma bonds. Okay, so how we can little bit tell them apart, or how you can at least try to start understanding what is a trauma bond if it's your first time hearing this term. A trauma bond is an intense emotional attachment that forms between the abuser and the abused person. It's not based on healthy love or some sort of respect that's between both partners. It's actually something that forms by a cycle of abuse, and in the same time there is some sort of positive reinforcement. Okay, so positive reinforcement meaning is basically the reward of a positive behavior, so to encourage it of happening again in the future. Now, how is that related, and how are we talking about something with positive reinforcement when we're discussing something like cycle of abuse? The reason for that is because this cycle creates like a dynamic of abuse that is continuous, and in the same time it's extremely manipulative. So usually the person who's abused is not able to tell that they are actually being abused. They're just feeling bad, but they cannot pinpoint where exactly is the problem. And that's because of the manipulation that happens in this cycle. And that's why often we were going to see that there's many people who are in relationships, and it's not like it's a matter of finance or anything like that, but for some weird reason they can't leave the person that is abusing them. They are continuously sticking with them no matter how much they're hurting from them, because it's very difficult to break from the cycle. All right, now get a paper and pen and let's start self-reflecting. I want you to reflect on the relationship where you feel it's a little bit confusing. There's gonna be like a do's and don'ts, and if you feel like there is something from what I'm going to be saying, just stick that and then you're gonna understand it in the end. All right, so there is one thing I've actually learned in therapy, and I would love to really share it with you because it's very relevant to this video. Now, in any unhealthy relationship that we're having, there's like some sort of 3 different types of characters that we see in this story, okay? There's the abuser or the bully, and then we also have the victim, and we have the savior. And we love associating ourselves with one of these. Does your relationship have any of the following? First thing is, does it have a repetitive cycle? All right, what does repetitive cycle mean, or how exactly would it look like? Are you experiencing something like or are you feeling some sort of abuse or negative emotion with one of these factors that your partner or the person that we're describing this type of relationship with is making you feel? Is it some sort of physical abuse, for example, or are you experiencing some sort of emotional, some sort of mental even, or even financial? Financial is also included. Do you feel abuse from them? And then shortly after you feel this some sort of abuse, it's followed by some sort of act of kindness or love or some sort of affection? If you're feeling that, put a tick there. Now, in this type of relationship, the abuser will tend to use fear and guilt in order to take control of the victim. So the abuser tends to have so much power over that victim, whether it's mentally, emotionally, or even financially, and uses that power in order to manipulate them and make them stay in that situation. So if you feel like there's some sort of power imbalance in that relationship, now you gotta put a tick there. Third thing is confusing emotions. Do you feel like a whole roller coaster of emotions, like extreme highs, extreme lows? You feel like intense butterflies with that person, yet you feel like you wanna, like, I don't wanna say this word, but like you wanna unalive yourself literally when you guys fight or when there's a problem between the both of you. So the thing is, okay, let me just a little bit separate this. Sometimes, yes, of course, we're humans, we're all different. So the thing is, we're gonna have problems. We are going to be different from one another in some aspects. This is all okay, but this is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when you're feeling those emotions extremely. Like extreme fear, extreme guilt, extreme anxiety, extreme hope, extreme even love for the abuser. When we experience all of these things, it makes it very difficult to see the situation as it really is. All right, now fourth thing is dependency. So do you feel like you are extremely dependent on that person that we're describing this type of relationship with? Do you feel like you're completely unworthy, you're worthless, you're nobody, literally, if that person is not in your life? Now, let me know in the comments how many did you get out of these. But basically, if you have any of these signs, or even if you have two of these is enough to tell you you are in a trauma bond relationship. Now, one thing you have to know is trauma bonds, you can notice them either right away. And the thing is, the more self-aware you are, the faster you will be able to recognize them. That's why, let's say, for example, your first relationship is probably not going to be as your third relationship, because you're going to be able to realize different things with them, different even habits with yourself. So this is one aspect. Trauma bonds can form even over like a long period of time or a short period of time. So sometimes it's not something you can notice literally right away. It can take time until you're able to see it. And even sometimes take time for it to develop, all right? So the thing is, if you're passing through abuse over and over again, this is going to turn into a trauma inside your body. Like, your body does remember the traumas that you are experiencing as well. One thing you have to know though, trauma bonds are not the same as Stockholm Syndrome. Now you're gonna ask me what is a Stockholm Syndrome, and I'm like acting all like I'm a psychologist, but I'm just a person who reads so much into mental health and have like, I kind of dive so deep into mental health therapy and all of this. But anyway, a Stockholm Syndrome is basically when the abused person develops some sort of feelings or attachment as a coping mechanism to their abuser. But it's not the same thing with a trauma bond. Now you have a little bit of understanding about trauma bonds, and you just want to, like, you just need more information, okay? You want to know, am I in love? Or am I experiencing a trauma bond relationship? All right, so now you have a little bit of understanding about what is a trauma bond, but you're still confused. You still have this thing that I don't think I'm experiencing these things, but in the same time, the relationship I'm in just seems a little bit weird, and you want to understand it more. Okay, so now we have 3 categories where we're going to be laying our foundation, let's say, or how we're going to be able to tell if we are in love or in a trauma bond relationship. So first thing is going to be the foundation. What is your relationship built on? Do you feel safe and secure with your partner? Do you feel like there is love and respect going on even when there is differences? Or is your relationship built on fear, guilt, and you're feeling scared all the time? Like, you're all the time acting or behaving in a specific way, not because you love this person or because you care about this person, but because you always have the thought, no, I'm afraid I'm gonna lose this person. I'm afraid this person is just gonna go look at another girl or another guy or whatever they're looking at, all right? Now, second thing is we're going to look at our emotions. What are we feeling? Are we feeling some sort of contentment? Are we feeling some sort of safety? There's some stability in the relationship. Like, overall, if you look at your relationship, do you feel more sane? Do you feel something that it makes sense? You feel happy, or you feel basically kind of okay with your relationship? Or are you feeling intense high and lows, like intense anxiety and then intense hope and feeling of love and attachment to that person? Are you also experiencing something like a strong fear of abandonment with that person? Okay, so the thing is, with the fear of abandonment, this is also based on my experience with therapy and all. I can tell you that sometimes it's not really related to your partner, it's actually just related to you. So you have to work on it, and you have to tell the difference. You have to tell the difference that, does that fear of abandonment like ring a bell regarding some sort of trauma you had before? Or is it just something that you don't feel safe like with that person or something like that? Now, last thing we're going to look at is dependency. How dependent are you on your partner? Do you and your partner encourage each other? Yes, you guys are attached to each other, you enjoy like working or being around each other, but are you also encouraging each other to have other healthy relationships in your lives? Or you feel so dependent on your partner, you feel like they can't go anywhere, they can't go with your friends, they can't do anything, they can't have any other functional relationship other than your own. And if they do have something like this right away starts to trigger you and starts to piss you off. Do you feel something like that? So yes, now look at the relationship where it's confusing you. Check the foundation, check the emotions, and check the dependency. How does it actually look like? I get this question a lot, which is basically, can you develop a trauma bond relationship with someone who is not really a romantic partner? And the answer is yes, you can. Trauma bond relationships are not exclusive to your romantic partner. These can develop and these can reflect even in your other relationships, like your friendships, even your relationship with your parents, your relationship with your siblings, even with your co-workers and your boss. These things can actually be triggered here and there. Basically, trauma bonds are created when there is a system, or basically there's some sort of cycle of events that keep on happening that are negative or that contain abuse from any person. And this is how trauma bonds are actually created, or this is how traumas are even developed. Traumas can actually be developed from any cycle of abuse. So the thing is, any abuse that you're experiencing from anyone, and specifically over time, they can be formed. Of course, maybe some bigger traumas or some sort of negative experiences that you're facing in your life, they can form quicker, but then some stuff can be formed over time. Like the more that they are repeated, the more that it's gonna be like indulged in your body as a trauma. Like for example, if we're going to look at family, sometimes you can develop a trauma bond with your family. Like you can still crave your parents' attention and love, but in the same time you are fearing them. So this is a sign of a trauma bond relationship there. Same thing with friendships. Sometimes you feel like you're walking around eggshells around your friend. You feel like their happiness is actually dependent on you all the time, and you take that type of responsibility because, as I mentioned, there's like 3 types of characters that we're living in when we are experiencing a trauma bond relationship. There's the abuser or the bully, then there's the savior, and then there is the victim. So the thing is, this is something that we have to kind of like look into. All right. So the thing is, we have to take one of those characters. If we're taking one of those characters, most probably we are in a trauma bond relationship. And as I discussed, even with your workplace, the boss can actually be using the fear of you losing your job and knowing that you have no other income, something to be kind of like enforcing you to do things that you don't really enjoy doing, or even to cross your boundaries sometimes. And also at the same time, they're going to be following this by a manipulative act. So the thing is, you can't fully give up on the job, but instead you feel bad about your performance. So in the same time, you can't go and ask for a raise, for example. So what they will do is that they're telling you, oh, you have a bad job, oh, you have to come at this time, or else like they're gonna give you always the feeling that you're gonna be fired. And then once in a while, maybe like, I don't know, maybe once a month, they'll be like, oh, you did this good, that's a good job. So then you feel like, oh, okay, there is hope there, I can be better. Maybe the problem is in me, it's not in them, it's just in my work. So yes, all of these things are also a sign of a trauma bond relationship, even with your work. Now, everything I mentioned in this video is basically the ABCs of trauma bond and love. This is all just based on my experience, based on my knowledge, based on my research, and I'm also going to be leaving all of my resources down below. And some of them, as I mentioned, this is something I've acquired through intense research into self-reflection and in therapy as well. So I hope that was helpful. Now, one last thing before this video ends, trauma bonds can be very, very difficult to break free from. So I don't want you to blame yourself or think that you're weak because you're not able to escape that type of relationship. Honestly, most of the people who are able to escape this type of relationship, and even internally, I'm not even talking about just leaving this, but even from inside of you, and not to get into another relationship that has the same cycle again, they usually do take therapists' help. And the thing is, I'm going to be leaving a link down below for if you're looking for a therapist to guide you and to kind of, you want to work some of the issues that you're experiencing, or if you're in any sort of abuse, I would suggest that you go right away to a therapist, because they're going to help you either escape this or either fix the situation. Because sometimes, in some cases, it's not really the person that we're with, but we are the problem. I have been to therapy 2 times. One time was in 2021, where it was kind of like life-changing for me. I needed to work on some childhood traumas that were still affecting me to my day-to-day. And then in 2023, I decided to go back, but more for like a self-reflection, and in the same time for not just self-reflection, self-awareness actually overall. I wanted to get to know myself more. I wanted to improve my character more. Therapy is not just for healing your traumas and all of that, and like having a healthy conversation with somebody, it's not just that. It's also about self-growth. Therapy is very, very important for self-growth. And this is why I think I've introduced myself before in other videos, but I'm the co-founder of Mission Elixir. Mission Elixir, we do help people develop and be better as a person overall. We start with them with a therapy process and healing them. And then after that, we take them on a career development and personal growth development. So in 2023, I went back to therapy, and I went actually to my therapist. She's amazing. And that time, this is when I learned a lot about relationships. I learned a lot about my relationship with money, even like how do I think about money, and why am I afraid of some stuff, why am I not acting on some stuff, and all of that. And this really changed my life, and this is why I would always recommend you go to a therapist. Honestly, in the end of the day, self-healing and self-growth is all in your hands. No therapist or no parent or whatever it is, they are responsible for your growth or for your healing. It's you. So the thing is, many people go to therapy, but then because they just want to continue on living in the victim mindset, so they would just continue on crying and not self-reflecting and not working with therapy. Remember that with a therapist is more of like they're holding your hand and taking you to your goal, but you have to have that goal and you have to walk, okay? Because they just can't drag you. They can help you a little bit, but in the end of the day, the self-healing is all in your hands. I remember very well when I finished my first time with therapy and I traveled, and I noticed there's a huge difference in my life. There's a huge difference in my mindset. And God, I don't want to even get emotional there, but I called my therapist and I thanked her. And then she told me one thing. She told me that it takes two people to reach there. She told me that if you did not want to heal, if you did not want to work on yourself and be better, we would never be here. So the thing is, all she did was just hold my hand, kind of guide me a little bit in the way that I needed to look at some stuff. And honestly, it was amazing. Like really, this whole experience was amazing. But it all really depends on you. And I have to put it also out there that this life is really not fair. As much as we wanted to see it that it's fair, and as much as I want to paint this sky with rainbows for you and for you to all be happy, but unfortunately this world is really not fair. And sometimes we have to fix the mistakes of things that we haven't done, and we have to take the responsibility for it. But that's life. In the end of the day, this is our life and we are responsible for fixing it. We either continue our whole life living as a victim, or either we choose to be survivors.